Hay Festival.
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 Bienvenidos al podcast Hay Festival 2025, un espacio para imaginar otro mundo.
Bienvenidos al podcast 2025, la edición especial del podcast del Hay Festival en español, en la que celebramos el 20º aniversario de nuestro festival en Cartagena de Indias. Yo soy Catalina Gómez Ángel.
Y yo, Iñaki Lasa de Tura. Para celebrar este momento único para nosotros, le pedimos a nuestros seguidores que nos enviaran las preguntas que consideraban eran claves para entender el mundo en el que vivimos.
Después de un largo ejercicio, nuestro equipo ha seleccionado las 20 preguntas que consideraban más significativas. Y para responderlas reunimos a algunas de las mentes más brillantes y más expertas en cada tema que participaron en la más reciente edición del Festival de Cartagena en enero del 2025. Empecemos, Iñaki.
Applebaum es columnista de The Atlantic Magazine y su más reciente libro es Autocracia S.A, los dictadores que quieren gobernar el mundo. Además de ofrecer un estudio del modus operandi de los autócratas modernos, Applebaum ahonda en una intricada red que liga a regímenes totalitarios con el mundo financiero, servicios de seguridad que se dedican al espionaje y talentosos propagandistas.
And welcome to our podcast. And as we explained, these are questions from our readers, and the most important, probably the first one is, are there alternative models to democracy?
I mean, there have always been alternatives to democracy. There are many different kinds of dictatorships. There are hybrid regimes. There are regimes that are illiberal democracies. I think the problem with all of them is that once you have a political system where only one person or one party has power, and once they are able to control the courts and they eliminate the rule of law and you have rule by law, in other words, the law is what the leader says it is, then sooner or later, all of those regimes decline. They become corrupt, inevitably. They become power hungry, and eventually they will need violence to stay in charge. So democracy is really the only political system that can preserve rights for people over the long term.
In your new book, in the last book, Autocracia S.A, you describe how these regimes, autocratic systems, they operate each one, but also how they work together. But I wanted to ask you a question about this. Why these regimes or these autocracies, they really hate democracy as much that they want to destroy it?
Because the ideas of democracy are their biggest threat. If you are Putin, or you are Xi Jinping, or you're the leader of Belarus, or you're Nicolas Maduro, then what is the biggest threat to your power? It's the people who believe in rights, who believe in transparency, who are anti-corruption, who want the rule of law. Those people and their ideals would destroy your system, and they would take away your power. And so they see those ideas as an existential threat. They want to maintain power without checks and balances, without competition, without legitimate opposition, without courts, without media. They want complete power. And so anybody who's inspired by another set of ideas is a threat to them.
Are we witnessing the end of the single Western narrative?
I think actually there's never was a single Western narrative. So I'm not sure that it's the end of that. What we are seeing the end of, I think, is an 80-year settlement, an international system based on the rule of law, based on the ideals of international law, based on the UN Charter. This may be coming to an end. And what we're seeing is the emergence of a political system where large states begin to feel that they can encroach on the rights of smaller ones. I hope it doesn't continue, and I hope that we find a way to go back to a world in which even small states have rights, but at the moment we're seeing the deterioration of that.
And would we give up civil rights for greater security?
So all through history, at points when people feel threatened, whether it's during a war or during a pandemic, people are willing to trade away their rights in exchange for some kind of security. You see that kind of temporary trade happen all the time. The difficulty is that if that becomes longer term, then you are in danger of losing your rights altogether. then you're faced with different kinds of challenges, political violence from the government, loss of justice, police, or security forces who aren't controlled by any rule of law. So there's a danger that if you give up your rights, you will eventually have threats to your security from a different source, from your own government.
And our last question is about misinformation, disinformation, and how can we combat or fight against that? But I will add something. How disinformation is a tool from these regimes, to not just to create wrong information, is to make people confused.
Yes,
and they operate like that.
So what we're really talking about is not misinformation, but propaganda. And there is a way in which modern propaganda is used. It was really invented by the Russians, but many other people do it now as well, which is to flood people with many, many different false stories, or even real stories, just many, many different explanations of a single event, and to confuse people and distract them so that they begin to say, right, I have no idea what really happened. I don't know what reality is. Therefore, I can't participate in politics. I don't want to be part of this conversation. I better stay home. And so there's a way in which propaganda can be used to create nihilism and cynicism and apathy. And that is a very, very important tool of modern dictatorships. And one of the fights that civilians and citizens who want to remain in democracies need to conduct is in order to keep people hopeful, to keep them optimistic, and to keep them engaged politically.
But how do that? How to fight against that?
I can't give you a formula. You can see that it's been done. So I lived part of the time in Poland, where we had an autocratic populist party in power, and through a combination of civic engagement and also people were very angered by corruption, we managed to, despite the fact that there was an unfair election, we managed to create a coalition of different center-right, center-left, and liberal parties that were able to push back against them. So it can be done.
Thank you so much. The time is finished, and
I'm afraid
Iñaki,
it's over. Yes, time is over.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Anne Applebaum, for being part of this special edition of the podcast. Gracias de verdad, Anne Applebaum, por esta edición especial del podcast Hay Festival en español. Imaginemos otro mundo.
Thank you.
Gracias por acompañarnos. Una producción de Ojo por Ojo Multimedia. Hay Festival 2025. Un espacio para que imaginemos otro mundo.